he's maintaining good core alignment, which actually makes him a better athlete. It keeps him safe, and it gives him real functional strength. It's not a artificial form of strength that we're doing here. He's actually keeping his body in the alignment that it should be in. So, and then he's using the weight that actually suits his body. So remember, don't try to use a bunch of weight here. Don't let your ego get involved into the lift. Try to use just what you can use with good form.
Quality over quantity.
Yes, that's one of the most important concepts. You're going to quality over quantity. And if you get used to doing that, you'll find that eventually the weight will increase. And so with this one, just let it go gradually. A lot of times we get our egos attached to the pressing motions. Like people ask, how much do you bench press? And would you say that that's really even relevant in a fight, how much you bench press?
Doesn't make any difference.
Okay, so one more thing here, just on the press before we wrap it up here, is that when you do the push press, remember that's an advanced variation. When we do this requires a little bit more explosion. We're using the legs, we're popping the hips. If you find that it's a little bit too ballistic, that maybe you don't feel comfortable doing it, it's totally fine to substitute just a standard press. And that's where we just come up and down, or even looking straight ahead. Very basic. So you don't have to do the push press unless you feel you're ready for that. And that's the basics of the dumbbell standing press. Okay, now let's talk about the dumbbell row. I consider the dumbbell row to be sort of like the yin to the yang or the yang to the yin to the standing press. It's sort of like the balancing out motion. And it's a very important motion because we don't really get any type of pulling motion with our body weight exercises. So we want to make sure that we include a pulling motion with the dumbbells. The important thing here is, if you notice, when George comes down, let's go and do a couple stationary rows there, George. Good. 1, let's do 3 here. 2, 1 more, and 3. And you can come back in the standing. Now, if you notice when he does his row, he sits back with his hips this way, onto his heels with his chest over his spine. He does not round. He keeps the back in a nice, strong, neutral position there. Again, remember the concept, core activation. It stays throughout, okay? So the core has to activate. I sit back here, and then I'm in good position. Now, this is a very important motion, so we have to remember, we try to pull our elbows back, and we're pulling with our elbows. That activates our lats, our rhomboids, our traps, all these muscles that make our backs very strong and allow us to do this motion. We have to use those. The biceps, the forearms, everything here, it is activating as well. But remember, we want to pull with the elbow. Now, George, let's show a rotational row. This is where he's actually going side to side. And let's go and get, some spinal rotation going on there. Good. Now, if you notice, it's the same motion. Now he's just alternating arms, but still the same strong back position. The core is activated, and he's moving the elbows around the spine. And George, now let's go ahead and go down into the prone position. Oh, no, okay, actually, let me grab one of these and just do a 1-arm, 1-leg row. Yeah, let's check that out. Now he's doing the same type of row, but now he's on, it's much more, this is an advanced variation. Now, if George wanted to modify this because, say, balance were an issue, let's say you're having a hard time doing that, George, just put your foot down. They're going to try to stay bent over, good, and row. And you could even brace your hand on your knee there too, George. Yeah, that gives him more stability. Okay, so that's an easier modification when you see a 1-arm, 1-legged row. And let's do 1 prone row, George. So put the dumbbells down here in front of you and out into this position. And we're just going to go side to side a few times. So now he's in that push-up type position. And notice he's pulling, he sets the weight down, he's going side to side.
My core is working as well.
Yeah, this is activating his core to the extreme. Now what we want here too, now George, let's lower down to the knees. Let's say George fatigues and he wants to continue on rowing, but his core it's gotten tired. This is a great modification to make. If you find that type of prone row becomes too difficult, you can always lower down to your knees. That makes it a little bit easier on the core, and you can still get that rowing motion in, which is a very important motion. And that's the basics of the dumbbell row. Now let's talk about the exercise upright rowing or high pulling, or I should say, because they're not exactly the same, but it's a similar movement pattern. Let's first look at the upright row. You'll notice this is a movement throughout. Now, the upright row is basically George in just a natural stacked position. Stacked meaning ear, shoulder, hip, knee, ankle. Nice natural posture. He's using the trapezius muscles, the deltoids, the biceps, everything here, and he's pulling upward. Notice how the elbow comes up higher than the wrist, and he's just activating all of that, pulling up. Now, that's our basic movement pattern. Now, George is going to do a little bit more advanced. George, you can actually just use 1. You don't have to even use 2 here. Now, let's do a high pull. Now, the difference with the high pull is this is leading into the Olympic lifts. He's using his legs. He's popping his hip, driving with his legs, and then using that to help pop it up And it's more of a leg exercise, and the arms are just activating towards the top. They're both great variations. Now, if you notice that the high pull is a little bit complicated, you can always substitute back with our basic that you saw there, which is just the upright row, whether it's with one dumbbell or with two dumbbells. And then if you feel comfortable, we use our legs. And if you notice, hey, George, can we do it just a couple more times? I just want to show one more thing here when you do it. And if you notice, when George does this motion, look at his spine. His spine is nice and strong. His core is activated throughout, and that allows him to connect his legs to his arms.
The actual work is more with the leg than the shoulder, actually.
Yes. That's kind of like with a punch or a kick, too, right? I mean, like almost everything that you do, it's more from the hips and the coordination.
Our legs is the strongest part of our body. Legs are much more stronger than the arms, so that's why we use the leg for everything that we do.
And that covers the basics of the dumbbell high pull or the upright row. Now we're going to talk about the dumbbell clean or the dumbbell power clean. Olympic lifting, in my opinion, is what we're all kind of building up to with, with athletic training and weightlifting. I think that's the main value of weight training for a fighter. Would you agree?
I agree, and that's one of the reasons why I implement Olympic lifting movement pattern in my training, because the Olympic lifters are the most explosive athlete in the world, and in my sport, I need explosiveness.
So George a lot of times trains with a barbell, but a dumbbell is a fine substitution. Never feel, like just because you don't have a big heavy weight, we can't get the same effect. Because when you think about what we're doing, whether we're using a barbell, a kettlebell, a dumbbell, whatever it is, we're essentially doing a jumping motion. This concept of triple extension of the ankle, knee, and hip joint like this, that's what people are doing with it. So George, let's go ahead and jump up. Yeah, let's show that a few more times. So that's what it looks like without, and really jump off the ground and really exaggerate it. And so if you notice, what an Olympic lift is, essentially we're projecting the weights upward, right, with this shrug, with this type of movement pattern, kind of like we're jumping up off the ground. But because we have heavy weights, we don't really jump. A lot of times we stay planted on the ground. Then as I land, I pop my elbows forward, and that gets me underneath the weight. So I'm actually putting myself underneath the weight, then I stand.
We transfer all our energy in the tools that we have, either if it's a barbell or a dumbbell. In Olympic lifting, they use a barbell, but we're going to transfer all the energy of the movement in our dumbbell.
Yes. So let's go and show it a few times with the dumbbell. Let's take a look at the basics here. So the first thing is this, there again, we get ourselves in a nice strong position. You notice George will fold over, but keeping the back in a strong position. Then he'll extend up, and he does the catch. So there's a couple parts. So George, let's just go and stress just the, yeah, good. And if you notice, let's do it one more time. Excellent. And what he's doing there, you can go and set the dumbbells down, George. He's extending here, okay? And remember, as he's extending, it looks like he's just throwing the weights up, but really what's happening is the weights are projecting upward, and as he dips, he punches his elbow forward, and he maintains good position here, and he squats down, he lands on his heels, then he stands, then he lowers. And if you notice, he's not in a rush. He's not doing this and dropping them down. It's very deliberate and slow because it's the explosiveness that he's trying to capture. He's not just trying to throw the weights around and do a bunch of repetitions. He's focusing on good leg drive every time. And another key component to the power clean is coordination. It's very difficult to project a weight in one direction and then drop and switch directions, catch and stabilize. So this is sort of like the epitome of athleticism.
Yeah, and when you drop down underneath, it's like a free fall. You have to let your leg just like a free fall. You let everything go.
So this is one of those motions that you might find almost too complicated in the beginning. And remember, the best way to practice is with no weight. Get used to this motion of sort of jumping, landing, and punching your elbows forward. Then eventually try to shorten the jump where it's just this. But in the beginning, if you find this too difficult, let's take a look at a fine substitution here. So if it's not going to be the same muscle energetics, we're going to lose some explosiveness. We're not getting the same coordination factor, but we're training similar muscles. So if I'm not able to do a power clean yet and I'm practicing just my body weight, I can do this when a power clean and a press or whatever pops up, and a push press pops up into the routine. I'm just going to lower down to a squat, stand, curl. So that's a fine substitution for the clean. Now, if it calls for a clean and press, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to squat, curl, and press. So throughout the movements, you might see that. Throughout the workout, you might see the need for a clean. There's a substitution, okay? We squat and we curl. And if it's a clean and push press or a dumbbell